Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is ROI of experimentation, innovating with data-driven precision. And with this extensive experience in building impactful brands, narratives, and harnessing data-driven insights, this speaker, our next speaker, has played a key role in driving growth through strategic and innovative marketing initiatives. And please join me in welcoming Mr. Mohinder Chakar, Marketing Director, Vietnam and Cambodia at Pernod Ricard.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Kim, for doing the lucky draw. I hope nobody's feeling sleepy anymore. It's very difficult doing the post-lunch session, and looking at the way people were coming in late, I hope everybody had a good lunch and they are in the mood to see a lot of data. Are we all ready to see some data? No. So when I saw the topic for discussion, I wanted to decide whether it should be more technical or it should be more towards the side of sharing some experience and something that everybody can take back and use. So what I chose to do was not to focus too much on the data side, because I think today all of us are very strong in harnessing and using data. So what I want to do is I want to share some processes and the way to approach experimentation, because that's also very important. How do we do experimentation? So answering the first question in the beginning, do we need to do experimentation? I think the answer is a resounding yes, especially when we look at the world today. One day you wake up, life is good. Next morning you wake up, there's a 49% tariff on Vietnam, and then suddenly you're trying to figure out what to do with your business plans for next year. So I think in such a scenario, we need to be always ready and very agile with both our mindsets and our product lineup to ensure that we are able to catch all these trends. So just to start, why do we experiment? And the first and the biggest reason is to make better decisions. Because in today's world, there are no right or wrong decisions. It's just about making more informed choices. And informed choices are about having the best information available at that point, and then using that information to make sound, rational decisions. Then, reducing uncertainties. Will this product, we see a trend in the market, and we try to understand, okay, how do I respond to that? Should I do option A or option B or option C? So through experimentations, we can understand the risk and reduce the uncertainty a lot. So this helps us avoid that. And finally, prioritizing and learning. Because when we look at the way we approach experimentation, sometimes, especially when we look at the initial proposals, you see a list of 15 KPIs in an experiment. Okay, I want to test this, I want to test this, I want to test this. Especially, let's talk about alcohol in our industry. I want to test a category, I want to test a price point, I want to test a channel, I want to test a drinking strategy, I want to test geography. So there are 6 or 7 variables sitting over there. And for us, it becomes very important to understand what are the priorities here, and then differentiate between what we need to test and what, if we have the potential, we have the chance, we can test. So for me, these are the 3 biggest reasons why we should be experimenting. And then the virtuous circle of experimentation, which I think all of us should be getting into. The first thing is building hypotheses. And hypotheses are very important in the way we structure our projects or our experiments. Hypothesis typically should be based on some data, some insight, or some research that we see. And then we put it out in the form of a question. And then, basis that question, we try to lay out the strategy to answer that question. And then from there, we try to find what are the ways of answering that question. And then we create the experiment prototypes to test. We run the experiment, we analyze our learnings, we look at the data in an objective manner, and then we see what worked, what did not work, what we take forward, what we drop, what we adapt, And then we repeat this cycle to ensure that we are learning over and over again. So now this is the circle of experimentation. So far, everybody okay? Are there any questions? Please feel free to stop me at any time and raise your hand and ask a question, or say that, you know, you don't understand this thing, or maybe I can explain something better, and I'll try to do that. So this is where I would like to spend a bit of time, because these are two tools that I have used most of my career in framing how I approach something new. And I see a lot of young marketers in this room, and I hope this can be something that you can take away from this session and use in your day-to-day work. So the first tool is something I call the 5 I's. It's not a new tool, it's not my tool. It's something I learned as a young marketer, and I found it very, very useful. So I've been using it forever for all new projects and you know, tests. And I have some members of my team sitting here who must be very pained to see this again and again in their meetings, and me asking them to come back with this structure. So what does 5 I's stand for? The first I is issue. So whenever we are starting on an experiment, we need to be clearly defining the issue. And the issue has to be a question, it has to be a challenge. How do I do this? How do I remove a barrier? Or how I leverage an opportunity? So it has to be either I maximize an opportunity or I remove a barrier. So issue has to be very clearly stated in the form of a question, either addressing a barrier or leveraging or maximizing an opportunity. The second I is information. Information is about relevant information, not all the information in the market. So when we are talking about a product launch or testing a new strategy, what is the information that is relevant to that particular category, that particular product, or that particular geography, or that channel? We should be only extracting the relevant information and trying to understand what are the insights we can gain from that, because that's the third I. The third I is insight. And insight very clearly is something that puts a fresh light on information. Because insight cannot be information. Insight cannot be, we went out and 22% of consumers say that they like this thing. That's not insight, that's information. So what are the insights coming from there? What are the insights that come from observation, from data, from qualitative information? So we combine all these things together to get some insight. And then from there, we come up with an idea. An idea typically has to be something that frames the undercurrent of what you propose to do. And we'll go through this in detail, because I'll take you through an example of how to bring the 5 I's to life. And finally, the fifth and the last I is implementation. So how do we bring that idea to life? How do we take it to the market? How do we execute it in the market? And so this steps: issue, information, insight, idea, and implementation. This gives you a framework on how to approach any project or any pilot or any challenge in the market. The second very important tool is the concept note. And a concept note is very, very important when you are testing something new. Because if you have a new consumer proposition, if you have a product, if you have an idea, if you have something that you want to test, it's always good to put it in a frame and check it out with actual consumers. And how do we structure the concept note? A lot of my industry friends from the research agencies will know this. It's a very common structure. You start with the consumer tension. The first part has to be a tension that you want to address. So to give an example, that I want to come up with a better phone. But what is the tension that my phone needs to address? Because today, if you look at the mobile phone industry, everything looks the same. But in the beginning, things were very different. Somebody was looking at phones addressing photos. I take better photos, or I'm good at messaging, or I'm good at emails. So when it comes to your product or your solution, what is the specific tension that you see today in the consumer's life that you want to address? And then the second part is solution. So how do you address that tension? In what way your brand, your product, or your solution can help consumers address that tension? That is the second part. And it has to be articulated in a very clear manner. And the final, reason to believe. What is the reason consumers should believe that your product can help them resolve this tension? If you can follow this structure and be very clear and articulate in your concept note, you will find that this helps you test a lot of concepts within your office. You can simply draft something in this structure, take it to 5 different people in your office, ask them to read it and check if it makes sense. And then that could be your first level of testing. And then later on, you can definitely if you have the money, use a research agency to run those tests. But for me, these 2 tools, 5 I's to start and structure your entire project, and then the concept note to ensure that you have a clear tension and a clear solution and a clear reason to believe in what you're proposing. These will help you a lot in having a very qualitative and quantitative discussion internally, and also ensuring that you make those choices in an informed way. So tools are very theoretical. So I want to take you an example on how we actually use them. So this is our brand, Jameson. I'm very proud of it. Jameson is it's the largest Irish whiskey brand in the world. It is one of the fastest growing brands in the world. But not unfortunately, but it is not something that's very big in Vietnam. Vietnam is a different kind of a whiskey market. So I'm going to share, last year we started testing out Jameson in Vietnam. And for some of you who attended the Smarties award last year, you were actually a part of that test because we were testing out the format in the Smarties award dinner as well. So we did an activation at the Smarties dinner, which was part of our test, the pilot that we did. So how did we decide to test and launch Jameson in Vietnam? And how did we follow the process? So I will take you through the 5 I's for this one. So how did it start? What was our issue? So Pernod Ricard, my company, I've been there for 18 years now. We are the largest spirits company, Western style spirits company in Vietnam. And we are almost roughly 1.5 times the size of our competitor. When COVID happened, all the business went down. Everyone was sitting at home and nobody could go out and drink. But then when COVID, the restrictions ended, we all saw the resurgence, the revenge consumption people went on and the market boomed back. And, we saw record numbers happening in most of the markets, including Vietnam. But then immediately after COVID and the resurgence, we saw that the market again went down. And then for 2 years, it stayed down, refused to move and constantly stayed there. So then, but Vietnam still has a lot of potential. It is, there are 100 million people in Vietnam. It is one of the biggest, one of the fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia. So how do we turn around a stagnating or a low growth market and drive it back to growth? So, information. Let's collect all the information that's available over here. So the first piece was that let's look at different price points. So in spirits, we have 5 price points. We have what we call standard and value, which is at the bottom. Then you have premium, super premium, ultra premium, and the prestige. So prestige is something typically, let's say, at more than $200 a bottle or something like that. And then we have ultra premium. So what we saw that between the $20 to $40 price points, that's where Vietnam was showing a lot of growth. And when we dug a little bit more deep into demographic and GDP data, we found that there's a strong correlation between growth of these price points and the growth of middle class. And we define middle class as households having income of more than $20,000 per year. So if the economy is growing at, let's say, 6%, the households having a growth of more than 20,000, they are typically 1 or 2 percentage points above the GDP growth. So Vietnam economy was supposed to grow between 7 to 8% from 2024 to 2028, 2030. And if we apply the same correlation and projection, so we can assume that the households having income of more than $20,000 would grow at anywhere from 9 to 10%. So which means that the premium price point and the super premium price point, they will also grow at 7 to 10% in that period. And finally, we all live in Ho Chi Minh, and I hope some of us are consumers of our brands. So when you go out, what do we see? The market is changing a lot. 8 years ago, when I used to come to Vietnam as a visitor, I used to see beer gardens as the biggest trend. Everywhere you go, you have those big, loud places, and there are, big tables over here, and people are drinking a lot of beers with very loud music. But it's changed. Now, what do we see as the biggest trend is cocktail bars. You have a lot of new formats. You have drinking healing, summer experiment. I don't know how many of you go out. But you see a lot of places with new, exciting concepts, experimenting, and we see the younger consumers going out there and not consuming in the old way, which was, Maut Hai Ba Yo, and then you finish your drink in one shot. But it's more like, okay, let's have a nice drink, let's take a few photos, let's post them on Instagram, and it's definitely a healthier trend. So when we combine all these three facts together, what we found was that definitely there is a shift in the way Vietnam, the young consumers are consuming spirits or interacting with the spirits category. That's the first point. Secondly, the most of the growth will come from premium, super premium price points. And third, Vietnam remains a whiskey market. So therefore, the biggest category and the most potential for growth will be for a whiskey brand. So when we combined all these things together, we decided, okay, let's do something in the modern on-trade, what we call the cocktail bars. But we have a huge database. So when we looked into our database, we found that there are more than 1,500 modern on-trade bars between Ho Chi Minh, Hanoi, Da Nang, and a few other the big cities. Now, if you want to launch a new product, going to 1,500 places is very expensive, very time-consuming, and takes a lot of resources. That's not how a pilot happens. So how do you identify the right outlets to go? We have our own internal models of doing outlet segmentation, but those are very broad, and they were not helping us. So what we decided to do, we decided to create our own segmentation model. I cannot show the details over here because those are confidential, and they use proprietary information, so cannot be shared. But this is something I encourage you to do, is always look at your data from different angles and try to find different perspectives. So what we did, we took all our accounts and we tried to put them on this 9-segment grid. The x-axis were very simple. Prices of one cocktail going from low to high. So for example, in Ho Chi Minh, we said a low cocktail is, let's say, 100 to 120,000 dong. And a high price for cocktail is anything more than 250,000 dong. So the mid price is, let's say, 150 to 180,000 dongs. So that's the pricing. And on the vertical axis, we put another criteria where we had enough information internally to be able to segment those 1,500 outlets in these 9 segments. And after we did that, what we found that there was this belt of 3 segments which were the perfect targets to launch Jameson in. So from 1,500 outlets, we went down to something like 400 something outlets. So your problem solved partially. And then from those 400, we identified the top, let's say 30 or 40 accounts where we want to go, do the testing, and launch. So how do you do launch? So we created, our big idea was open Jameson, open smooth stories. I will not try to speak the Vietnamese part. I've been learning, but I'm not so good yet. So the whole idea was to leverage our brand and the brand platform. And how did we implement it? So we did our first pilot around Christmas with our platform, just to give you an idea. Jingle bell, ginger ale, ring the bell for ginger ale. Vui xem sân, bên trên sân, mở vào câu chuyện đêm. Jingle bell, ginger ale, ring the bell for ginger ale. Oh, what's fun is to sip on Jameson ginger ale. So, basically, this was our test platform. What were we testing? We were testing a drink strategy. So we had a drink, which was Jameson ginger ale. We were testing a channel strategy. We were going to 3 different kind of outlets in those 3 different segments and trying to see where do we find the most traction. We were also trying to understand the price point, what price point works the best. That's why you saw that we had two different price points and two different kind of outlets in our target to ensure that we understand whether which price works and which kind of outlet and then which combination works the best. So we tested these three things out, and after this promotion happened in November, December, in January, we went back, we took out all the data from the test, and then we tried to understand what worked, what did not work, what we need to change, and we actually did a second pilot in March around St. Patrick's Day, which is the biggest Irish festival, and again, strongly associated with Jameson. So this is how, we keep doing the testing cycle to learn, understand, make our choices and get better. And going forward in next year, our new year begins from July. We are very clear on what we want to do, how we want to do, and you will get to see a lot more Jameson around you, hopefully. So what are the key success factors? Very quickly. Be data-driven. It's always important to be rooted in facts. Because when you start saying, I feel this, I feel that, there'll be 10 different people in the room who feel differently or who have a different feeling in their gut. So always root your discussions on data with relevant information, in-depth, clear KPIs for your pilots, and always use dashboards as much as possible to share information. Because dashboards are transparent. Everybody has access to the same information. So anybody, without any help, can log into dashboard, check the performance of your pilot, and then you can use that for your meetings. Second and very important part, get top management buy-in. I learned a very funny term recently, HIPPO, highest paid person in the room. And normally, HIPPO's rule, you are planning a meeting, you do something, and then the HIPPO comes, he says, no, I don't like this, change it, and then everything changes. That's not the best way to do things. The best way is to be data-driven. But then how do you ensure that those people are behind you? So therefore, get their buy-in. Do your one-on-ones, do your alignment meetings with them. Ensure that they understand what you're trying to do. Because if you do that, first of all, the culture is flowing from top to bottom. So when they endorse you, everybody else sees that endorsement and they are more open to supporting you. And secondly, they also ensure that you get the resources which are very important to do any activation. Get the team involved. Build transverse teams. Share ownership of outcomes and be generous in sharing credit. Don't try to hog, say, oh, my idea, it works, I get the credit. Because I can tell you most experiments fail. So it's better to spread everything, that when success comes, everybody feels happy. If failure happens, nobody gets blamed. I'll give a very quick, I'm almost running out of time. I'll give a very quick example. So we have this portfolio of brands, which was unnamed, and everybody just kept referring to that portfolio by random names. And because of that, nobody was owning it. So last year, when I came in, I put a challenge to the team that, can we put a very strong brand name, internal brand name to that portfolio? And then we came upon the name Kachep. For the Vietnamese, Kachep, I hope you know the story of the carp that flows against the current and turns into a dragon. So this portfolio was a portfolio of about 5-6 brands, which are globally very big, some of our strongest brands in the world. But in Vietnam, they are very strong, and they contribute very little to our value. But we know that if we persist, if we invest behind these brands consistently, in the next 5, 6, 7 years, they will become equally big in Vietnam. But we need to drive that belief, that consistency behind that investment. So we created a portfolio as one whole unit. We built that brand name, Kachep, behind that. And today, everybody refers to that entire portfolio as Kachep. And they believe in the story that this carp, maybe it's small today, but it holds the pearl in its mouth. And in the future, it's going to become the flying dragon. So these things are very important in getting the teams involved. And finally, process versus outcome. Be invested in the process, don't be invested in the outcome. Because most experiments will either fail or not work fully. So it's better to own the process and see what we can take out rather than see everything as in black and white as a failure or a success. And learn from failures. They will happen a lot. We all will have long careers. And in your long careers, nothing will be, you will never be facing success all the time. a lot of your tests you will do will be not doing well. But it's important that we take a pause, we learn from them, and then we take that learning as a build into our next test that we do. So, very quick, this was all that I had, and I wanted to share some of my learnings and my experience with you. I hope it helped you. And if anybody has a question, comment, feedback, happy to take it right now, if it's there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.